Good evening and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. The public can attend tonight's meeting in person at the George DeCiero City and County Buildings Council Chambers located at 1 Tacoma Drive, or watch live on Channel 8 and through live streaming on Broomfield's website, broomfield.org/live. The public may also participate in public comment either in person or by calling 855-695-3744 and pressing *3 to be placed in the queue for comment. Screeners will ask callers for their first and last names and the item the caller would like to comment on. If you'd like to speak on more than one item on tonight's agenda, you'll need to press *3 each time to be placed back in the queue. Public comment will be limited to 90 minutes total per item. The first 1 through 15 participants in the queue have 3 minutes. The next 16 through 25 have 2 minutes. And if time remains, the next 26 plus participants in the queue have 1.5 minutes to speak. For our hearing impaired residents present, we have wireless headsets available through our AV team in the back of the council chambers. The City Council regular meeting is called to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Anderson. Here. Cohen.
Here.
Delgadillo.
Here.
Henkel. Here. Jezierski. Leslie.
Here.
Lim. Here. Marshallson.
Here.
Schaff.
Here.
Ward.
Here.
Thank you. A quorum is present. Will everyone please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. In an effort to keep order for tonight's meeting, I ask council members to limit their comments to 5 minutes. If council members are given an opportunity to speak for a second time on an item, they should limit their comments to 2 minutes. And we'll plan on a 10-minute break at approximately 8 p.m. We'll begin with council's review and approval of this evening's agenda. Council may add or remove items from the consent agenda, or council may revise the order of business for the meeting. Does any member of council have any comments or questions regarding this evening's agenda? Are there any objections to this agenda being approved? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. The first item under petitions and communications this evening is a proclamation declaring August 2023 as Child Support Awareness Month in Broomfield. Will the staff here to accept the proclamation please come and meet Councilmember Marshallson at the podium? And go ahead and introduce yourselves for those who don't know you.
Good evening. I'm Karen Anastas, Self-Sufficiency Manager with Broomfield Human Services.
I'm Susan Johnson. I'm Supervisor with Broomfield Human Services.
Chris Dewhurst, Deputy Director, Human Services.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, Dan Casey, Director of Human Services.
Thank you all. This proclamation recognizes that financial and emotional support from parents and caregivers is an important component of child success, health, and well-being, and helps children grow into healthy, productive adults. Broomfield is committed to promoting the health and well-being of children by providing a variety of family-centered child support services to help ensure that parents pay child support on a regular and timely basis. This contributes to improved parent-child relationships, improved educational attainment for children, and reduced reliance on public assistance programs. Therefore, as mayor, I hereby declare and proclaim August 2023 as Child Support Awareness Month in Broomfield, and join in saluting those parents who support their children and honoring the Broomfield child support professionals who strive to impart dignity and respect to the families receiving services. Would you like to make any remarks, Ms. Anastas?
Certainly, I'll take the opportunity. I thank you for having me. I don't get this opportunity very often. So I'm pleased tonight to be able to come before the council and just talk a little bit about the child support services that we provide community connected to Broomfield. We have a staff of 2 full-time and 2 part-time staff. We collect about $3.2 million a year in child support for those connected to the community, as I indicated. We are fortunate in that we have a dual role. Not only working to collect the support, but also working with parents that are facing barriers. We've discovered that a lot of time individuals don't necessarily not want to pay support, but they have barriers preventing them. And so we work in direct collaboration with our workforce center and the courts to ensure that all avenues of effective and fair orders are obtained. And we've really made a big difference for the children that we're able to help. So thank you in helping us recognize that for our community.
Thank you for all that you do. Anyone else? Mr. Casey?
I don't have a lot to add. That was well said. I think the one thing that I would just stress is that the Child Support Awareness Month is for our children and our families, right? So child support is established so that our children have the ability to thrive and to get this financial support that they need from that family. So I think this is a great proclamation. And again, thank you for having us.
Thank you. Well, we do take public comment. So if anyone would like to comment on this item, please come up to the podium. No pressure, though. And then comments and questions from council are next. Any members of council? Have any? Councilmember Marshallson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say you guys do an amazing job. When my older kids were younger and were minors, I had a case with you all. I had custody of them, so we were dealing with trying to get support from their mother. So the professional way that you guys handle your office is amazing. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shah.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for bringing this proclamation to us. One of the statistics, and I wanted to clarify before I ask my question, 2.5 million collected annually. Was that the number?
No, it was a bit above that, 3.2 million.
3.2 million. And how does that compare statewide and nationally in terms of our population size?
Well, I'm not sure I can give you those statistics, but Broomfield is consistently found to be the outstanding medium county performer in Colorado. So I'm just going to add my support that we collect a significant amount of money and are recognized year after year by the state. So Colorado is one of the leading states in terms of overall child support collected in the nation. So luckily we have great leadership that allows us to do that.
Thank you. That's all, Mayor.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you for all you continue to do for the children in our community. Next, we have some guests joining us from United Power to present Broomfield with a capital credit check. And it sounds like credit check. Get that? Anyway, and provide an update. Will the United Power representatives please come to the podium and introduce themselves?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I'm Brian Blem, your key account advisor with United Power. And tonight I'm joined by our CEO, Mark Gabriel, to present to you your capital credit for 2023. And since Mark is here, I'm going to defer to him to present to council.
Well, thanks, Mayor and Council, for having me back again. I was here last year. This is one of my favorite parts of the job. Every day, of course, we work to keep the lights on for our 109,000 and growing members. And the city and county of Broomfield are clearly a key component in that. You know, as a cooperative, we don't just have customers, we have members. And that really is kind of at the core of what we do and how we think about our jobs every single day. We're one of the largest, fastest growing cooperatives in the country and one of the fastest growing utilities in the country. And part of it is from the growth that's coming here in Broomfield. And it has interesting challenges, but also really it is an exciting time for us. And the way the cooperative model works is you are all our owners. You are members. And so every year we take a look because you get power from United Power. We take a look at the finances, and lo and behold, when we've got margins, we work very diligently to return that to all of our members. So we get to share the capital credits with our communities and with our members. And it's really important, big piece of our business. And really the staff every day thinks about how do we serve our members, because they're not just meters at the other end. It's part and parcel of the way we think. every year, our board of directors has a decision to make. How much can we return to our members? This past year, the board voted to return $4.5 million to our communities. And it's a pretty decent amount. The city and county of Broomfield has 86 accounts with us. Since 1997, we've returned more than $151,000. And that includes the retirement check that we have here today. So on behalf of the cooperative, I'm pleased to deliver your 2023 capital credit retirement in the amount of $10,684.77. And again, it is an honor to serve you and to be engaged with the communities here.
Awesome. It definitely sets y'all apart. Set a high bar. Well, we'll start with public comments and then council comments, and then we'll take a group pick with you guys. So if anyone would like to comment, please come on up to the podium.
Roxy Jula Lockmora. I'm from a rural community that actually I still own electrical in another county within Colorado. But where I live, we don't have your service. So, but we are happy that you are here in Broomfield. Even though I don't get nothing from you, I still am happy that you are here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Any council member comments or questions? All right, well, go ahead, Councilmember Lim.
On behalf of the Environmental Sustainability Group, I'd like to also thank you for working towards renewable energy in your portfolio at United Power. We've been talking about open space, open lands that we still have left in Broomfield, and where we might put solar arrays possibly in the future. So I was just wondering if United Power has considered putting any large solar arrays in the vicinity, like maybe like east of I-25 in Broomfield.
Great. Well, that's a fabulous question. Many of you know we're leaving our current power supplier as of May 1 of 2024 and are in the process right now of contracting for new power supply. One of the theories that we have and what we're putting into practice is what I tend to call hyper-localization. We're very interested in projects within our communities and within our footprint for several reasons. First and foremost, it's really tough in the Western United States to build new transmission. And as much as I'm a transmission guy and love to have big projects coming in, that's not going to support us and the growth that we're seeing. So we're really looking for projects locally. And in fact, just 2 weeks ago, announced a battery project where the batteries are going to be located at substations within our footprint. It saves us money as well, because if we don't have to use transmission, we can do it locally. So we're working with all sorts of project developers. We're not building the projects ourselves, let me be clear, but we're looking at purchase power arrangements. We're looking at some really exciting projects going forward. So we certainly entertain as folks who want to build projects and hook to our system. With our growth, just yesterday, I'll scale it for you. We hit almost 620 megawatts. That makes us the third largest utility in all of Colorado. And our growth projections, including here in Broomfield, we will be doubling in size in the next 5 years. So we're going to need all the resources that we can get. And we're always happy to entertain local resources. Oh, the third piece is we really like to keep them here in the communities because of tax revenue.
Great. On a personal note, I'd like to say that my solar arrays are up and working thanks to the solar co-op that our sustainability department sponsored, thanks to Broomfield inspectors, and thanks to United Power inspectors, all working very swiftly to get everything up and running. So I'm excited about that. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right, anyone else? Let's take our photo. So we did that. And the final item under petitions and communications is a review of Broomfield's 2022 annual financial report from Reuben Brown LLP. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, and I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Ms. Ritchie. Are you anticipating Reuben Brown just? Well, there he is. He's already there. Kind sir, please introduce yourself.
Perfect. Yes, I'm Matt Marino. I was your engagement partner this year, and behind me is Stephanie Simon. She was your engagement manager. We have the pleasure of serving as your auditors. I know pleasure and auditors don't always go together, but we'll go with it today. We do a couple different audits for the city every year. Every year, we first and foremost audit your financial statements. Your finance team puts together something called your annual comprehensive financial report, and then we audit it, make sure that we can validate the numbers and that they reconcile to supporting documentation. And then we also do an extra audit because the city receives and expends more than $750,000 of federal funds. And so we audit several of those programs every year on a risk-based approach. We went through the audit results of both the financial statement audit and the what's commonly called the single audit or your federal funds audit last week at the study session in great detail. So I wasn't going to redo that today, but I'm happy to report that we did issue unmodified or a clean opinion on the financial statements. And we did issue an unmodified or clean opinion with a couple recommendations on the federal funds audit. Really nothing to note other than what's highlighted in those reports. I do want to clarify one thing with regard to the adjustments that are proposed. The adjustments usually relate to items that are reported either in a different period. They might be slightly different due to a clerical error, not usually omission of facts and circumstances. It's just errors that are corrected. And that's why we're here as auditors, to correct the errors. And so I just wanted to highlight that because I wasn't sure I was quite clear once I exited the study session last year or last week that I wanted to clarify that for you. Any questions?
We will see. We do have an opportunity for public comment. If anyone would like to comment on this item, we'll let you go first.
Roxy Gillette Lockmore. I was at that meeting last week. They did a pretty good job. I am happy that this auditor is not praising our community for doing above any other community on their paperwork, keeping their monies in place, because that's not what an auditor's job is for. So the previous auditors, needless to say, I did not like. And so I consider them as liars. So that's not their job, is to praise who they are auditing. They're to do what this one did, and that's fine. If there is any discrepancies, let them know, let us or let anybody know what they are and get them fixed if they can be fixed, or get them fixed in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? All right, we'll go to council member questions and comments now. Does any member of council have any questions or comments? This is the third time we've seen you, right, in the last month.
But I love talking about it. I'll come and talk anytime about it. You'd love to talk. So.
Fleshed out all of the questions at this point. So I think, yeah, no, that's it.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Well, we appreciate it being of service to the community. We look at as service. It's yes, we are hired by you, but it's also service to make sure that we're producing clear and transparent financial results that which your management team is a partner in doing. And so we really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. All right, council's community and event updates are next. Does any member of council have an update? I always do that. I skipped public comments probably for the fourth time. We'll move to public comment next. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on matters other than the items already listed elsewhere on this evening's agenda. So if you'd like to be heard, please come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. John Ewalt, Pinnacle North. I have 2 items to talk about tonight, but they're both short. So if that's acceptable, I'll hit both of them. So first, I want to thank council and especially the staff that puts in all the effort necessary to make council sessions, the videos available online. I've been dealing with some family health issues and I have not been able to attend council meetings for quite a few months. However, I was still able to keep up and follow along on my own schedule. I have not watched all of the sessions, but I have tried my best. This is a great benefit for Broomfield residents, and I hope it continues long into the future. Second, I would like to raise an objection to ever hiring Magellan Strategies again to conduct a survey for the city and county of Broomfield. Any entity performing a survey should be as impartial as possible and prevent even the perception of bias to ensure the results are an accurate representation of the surveyed populace. It's clear Magellan had a desired outcome of support for the potential sales tax ballot measure. This was on display in their written findings with statements like, quote, unfortunately, these results show that the proposed ballot measures will very likely fail, end quote. And how Ms. Sievers displayed disappointment in her presentation to council that the people were not in support of the tax increase. Luckily, the issue was so unpopular with residents, it didn't matter how Magellan tried to spin the results. It was clear that council should not proceed. Had the results been closer to 50-50, Magellan may have been able to spin the results in such a way to make you all believe that there was support for the tax increase, only to have it fail this fall. If I were sitting in your position, I would want accurate information on how residents are feeling, not hearing what the survey company thinks I want to hear. Hopefully, the next time Broomfield conducts a survey, they pick a surveyor that is more dedicated to their craft and polling the populace in an impartial manner instead of including their own bias or what they perceive you as decision makers want to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Roxy Jewel Lockmore. The same night that you had the tax information, it was brought up how well the council does not vote in extra money senselessly. That exact same night, you actually voted in $40,000 for one of the surveying groups that we're having work for us right now. I don't agree to what you did. There's nothing I can do about it because you've already done it. But I put a call out to every citizen and every person who lives in Broomfield, whether you're a taxpayer or not. You might buy a pop or something at the grocery store. Now, you are a taxpayer and you are a citizen of Broomfield and other people around. Please pay attention to what is going on with our community, the city and county of Broomfield. I wish I could have everybody just take a 30-day pause and not change no rules and regulations, but this group doesn't work that way. They're gung-ho, they all have their little private little things, and you want to get things passed. And that's what happens, whether it's good or bad for the community or not, and whether the community cares or not. Just like going to study session, deciding something, bringing it back to the next meeting and putting it on the consent agenda and passing it, send it to the second reading. People can come and talk about it, which by that time, it doesn't matter really too much at all. You might give a little bit of change in whatever that item might be, but it has already been decided. So, and I know everybody's gonna say, oh, that's not true. but look how it's done. Directly from study session, consent agenda, which is first reading, it's accepted, and it goes to second reading, where the public can talk about it. They should talk about it long before it ever goes to first reading, or it should be talked about it during first reading. Okay, I want everybody in the city and county of Broomfield, everybody, I don't care who you are, pay attention to your town. Not everything is good for everybody, especially the middle class. And that's all I'm going to say for now. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving us a few minutes to come tonight. My name is Janella Carlson, and I am the Communication Director for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for the Westminster Stake. We are the congregation that is across the street from the Paul Durda Rec Center. And the other congregation that meets in the city of Broomfield is on Main Street. That's for all those west of the Sheridan Street, where my friend here is the director of. Our desire and our biggest hope as a communication council for our members is to serve the community, especially the one that we live in Broomfield. I'm a longtime, over 30 plus year member of citizen of Broomfield, and we would love to help out the community in any way we can. One of the things that we do is we have a 9/11 service day, which is the weekend of 9/11 of September 11 coming up. And this is where we have met with the city of Broomfield to help do some painting of benches and putting in mulch in some parks. We'll also work with Friends, which is an organization in Broomfield, and Meals on Wheels here in Broomfield, and do a little work with Joyful Journeys and different things like that also. Another thing that we do is we have every March, we have a teacher appreciation. And that is where we invite the seniors of our congregation. There's usually between 15 and 20 to invite a teacher who's influenced them most in their journey. And it is a wonderful night as each of the seniors get up and they talk for just a couple of minutes about the impact that a teacher that they had growing up has, and that teacher is there. This is where we've had the principal of Broomfield High speak there, Ginger Ramsey. The principal of Legacy High School has spoken, Sarah Marks. The principal of Holy Family, the principal of Prospect Ridge Academy, the principal of Jefferson Academy has come, and just it is if you want a wonderful night to see these youth show appreciation to the teachers they've had and the influence they've had, we would love to invite you to that. That is in March. We also try to, again, work with the different food banks here, sometimes bringing food and doing that. The other thing that I just wanted to take a second to talk about is Just Serve, which is a website, and you just go to justserve.org. And when you go on there, there are a lot, you type in your zip code, and then within a radius, it tells you all of the different needs that there are in the community where service projects can have help or where they need help, and where you or a group, or it could be a youth group, it could be your family, it could be anyone who is looking for service. It kind of fits the needs with your ability to serve. And so we just wanted to make you aware of that. So as you've been getting invitations from me for a while, I just wanted to put a name with a face, and would love to have you come out anytime, or if there's a need you know of, let us know so that we can help out our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
As Janella said, I'm Barb Pfluger, and I am the director for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on the west side of Lowell Boulevard. Our main purpose here tonight, we've sent you emails after emails after emails, but we are here to connect a face to those emails. And another thing that we are here for is to let you know that our job is to sniff out in the community any service project or any need for service, and the kinds will vary, that we can augment, that we can help with. Our main strength is the members that belong to our church. We have great manpower. We have great ability to collect items. When Health and Human Services was up here talking, of course, my ears just perked up because that's what we're doing. We are out in the community. We want to help. wherever we can. So when you get an email from us, usually the reason that we're sending that, and again, it's B Pluger, P-L-O-E-G-E-R at com.Church of Jesus Christ, is that we are offering some sort of a service for you, because that is what our commission is. I wanted to mention one other thing. Our church as a whole has many global initiatives. They have local initiatives. One I want to tell you about, Mayor Hancock actually requested to have come to Denver, and that is something called the Giving Machines. And what they are, they're vending machines in essence that come the day after they open the day after Thanksgiving, and they go until January. We have businesses who have had corporate events attending these giving machines. We also have businesses who have matched corporate donations. Let me tell you a few things that in one year were listed in these vending machines. And I should back up to say that we choose global organizations to serve. One year we had a mirror book for $5 for the it's so small, Black Child Development. Anyway, I can't see it. We've served Catholic Charities, Rose Andom Center. We will send out information when you get something from us and it says Giving Machines. It's really a neat thing. Community or departments can have team building exercises with it. It's wonderful. So please just keep in mind that our purpose is to reach out to communities. That is what our sole purpose is, to serve out in the community, to identify needs, and to do what we can to serve. So that's what we're doing here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming and for your service.
Oh, I meant to tell you, thank you for your service to our community.
We appreciate y'all. Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, now we'll move on to council's community and event updates. Does any member of council have an update? Councilmember Marshall Olson?
Thank you, Mayor. I attended the National Association of Counties Conference this weekend in Austin. I just flew back this morning, so I will have a much more detailed report next council meeting. But it was a packed conference. It was a really good opportunity and learning experience. Just want to highlight though that I sit on the Finance, Pensions and Local Government Affairs Steering Committee for NACO. And we had a really good discussion about, I think we passed 11 resolutions urging Congress to act on various different things. One of which I wanted to highlight was the issue with insurance with wildfires. The fact that a lot of our communities are losing wildfire insurance, or the insurers are leaving because of the recent uptick in fires. So we passed a resolution encouraging Congress to study the issue and hopefully do something about it. So I will have much more detail in my full report later. So thank you.
Good. Thank you. Councilmember Lim?
Yes, Councilmember Schaaf, Mayor Castriana, and I would like to invite Ward 3 residents to our Ward 3 Town Hall on Saturday, July 29th, this upcoming Saturday, from 1 to 2 in Country Estates Park Picnic Shelter. So we'd like to have you bring your questions and your concerns, and we'd love to talk about them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other event updates? Councilmember Schaaf?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Lim, for talking about the Ward 3 community meeting. I also wanted to alert people that, the major community highlight during the summer is always the summer concert series put on by the Creative Broomfield. And tomorrow, which is kind of crazy to think about, is the last summer concert series at 7 p.m. at Midway Park. I can't believe the summer is coming to an end and fall will be here before we know it. So get out there and enjoy the last summer concert series. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Ward?
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to note, I last week attended the National League of Cities Summer Board and Leadership Conference. It was in Tacoma, Washington. Just some brief highlights. I did send to council an email with a full debrief. Housing, transportation, and equity were major themes, and how they all work together to better the community as a whole, and how they involved community, or how they got the community involved when making those decisions. Because Tacoma, like I like to think that Broomfield does this too, does not make any decisions without community input. And they really try very hard to get as many community members as possible to comment so that way we have a full picture, or they have a full picture. And then lastly, this Thursday, so the 27th, Taste of Broomfield is happening. The Charter Review Committee is going to have a booth set up at Taste of Broomfield. So for those of you who are attending, please stop by. There'll be some information. You'll find out how and where to give comment. So that way the Charter Review Committee can take that under advisement as we continue the process of going through the charter, figuring out what, if anything, needs to be changed, and make that recommendation to council. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council member updates? All right, well, thank you all. Moving on, council's consideration of the consent agenda is next. The clerk will read all of the consent agenda items by title, and there'll be one opportunity for public comments and council questions and comments. Following the clerk's reading of consent agenda items 7A through 7C, we'll ask for public comments. Will the clerk please read agenda items 7A through 7C by title?
7A, approval of minutes from the regular meeting of July 11th, 2023. 7B, resolution number 2023-97, authorizing and approving intergovernmental agreements for election services by and between the city and county of Broomfield and the following districts: Adams 12 5-star schools, Ames Community College, Boulder Valley RE2, Jeffco Public Schools, School District 27J, St. Vrain Valley School District RE1J, Weld RE8, and North Metro Fire District. 7C, request to schedule executive sessions for the purpose of obtaining instruction to negotiators and receiving legal advice regarding the Jefferson Parkway Public Highway Authority.
Thank you. We'll now proceed with public comments, starting with in person. Please come to the podium.
Roxy Jewel Lockmore. From what I understand is if something's on the agenda, I can't come up in public meeting and discuss it. So on item C here, years back, Broomfield Council had done a vote and voted that we would not continue on with the Jefferson County Expressway, or whatever they want to call it. According to Jefferson County Development that is over there in the area off of 128th and Sims, if you look at their drawings and stuff, it shows that Jefferson County Parkway is going straight through Broomfield open space. So I haven't been able to say anything until I figured out to do it now. I think the public needs to be kept informed on what's going on, because now we're seeing it in pictures and stuff. So are we losing open space? I mean, I just have all kinds of questions. Are you breaking an agreement that the previous council made? Because if that's so, then you can break other agreements. Like, well, I won't go on with that part, but if you can break those agreements, then you could break other agreements. So we need to know what's going on. I've talked to other people, they're a little upset. They don't know what's going on. And so this would be a good time for people to hear something. Obviously not tonight, but maybe you guys can figure out some time to let us know whether you are letting it go through. Are we losing open space? What's your decision? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, any council members have any comments on these agenda items? Before asking for a motion, I want to remind everyone that item 7C is a request for executive session and requires 2/3 approval of council. Is there a motion by council that the recommendations contained in the staff reports for agenda items 7A through 7C be approved? Councilmember Ward.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Henkel. Second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. There is no business before the Board of Social Services this evening. Our first item under council business this evening is council's consideration on first reading of proposed ordinance number 2216 regarding the Colorado Model Electric Ready and Solar Ready Code. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. Anna Burton-Zetti is going to walk us through this item. She's the Co-Director of Community Development, and Tim Pate, our Chief Building Official, is also here to help her with this presentation. Ms. Burton-Zetti.
Thank you and good evening, Mayor, no Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. Anna Burton-Zetti, as was mentioned, Planning Director and Co-Director for Community Development. I can have the next slide, please. So our staff memorandum, as well as the summary slide that has a lot of words, provides the background for how conserving energy through development standards for new construction is helping to move Brimfield towards its goals related to greenhouse gas emissions reduction. In short, buildings are responsible for about 40% of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. Reducing emissions from buildings can therefore help us reduce greenhouse gas emissions locally here in Brimfield. Earlier this year, Brimfield took a step forward towards more energy efficient building requirements through the adoption of the 2021 code series, which included the 2021 energy code. Tonight, we're bringing forward the next step in the energy conservation related to building construction requirements as outlined in our energy code roadmap that we discussed with City Council in April of this year. Next slide, please. In 2022, House Bill 22-1362 was adopted, which was intended to update minimum energy code requirements for the state of Colorado, for communities within the state of Colorado. The bill required the creation of a state energy code board to finalize a model electric ready and solar ready code. This code was completed in June of this year. And Tim Pate, our Chief Building Official, we're very fortunate to have him on staff, was appointed to this board and therefore is very knowledgeable about this code. A link to this code was included with our memorandum, as well as some of the supporting documents that were produced by the Colorado Energy Office. Cities and counties throughout Colorado will need to adopt this model code when they update their building codes, but Brimfield is considering the early adoption of the code as directed during the study session earlier this year. The state model code includes three main components. It requires new developments to be solar ready, electric ready, and electric vehicle ready. The solar ready requirements require all new development, so that's commercial, multifamily, or single family, to be solar ready with room on the roof and sufficient space in the electrical panel to allow for the installation of the future solar electric installation. And then similarly, the electric ready means that new construction, again, 1 or 2 family dwellings, multifamily or commercial, as well as any additions to existing commercial, and for any tenant finishes that go into unfinished space within previously constructed buildings, be electric ready. So electric service is provided to each location where there is natural gas provided. Alternatively, a builder can of course choose to do electric only construction within this code. And the intent with this electric ready requirement is that there will be an easier future transition to electric when the tenant or property owner is ready in the future. Next slide, please. The electric vehicle ready requirements are a little bit more complicated, so they deserve their own slide here. And it's more complicated because Brimfield has already adopted some electric vehicle parking requirements last year. Those are included within Title 17 of our municipal code and were applicable to any project that was moving forward through the process in about the last year since its adoption through a PUD plan process. So those projects that had a site development plan. There are some differences between Brimfield's requirements that were adopted last year and the model code. Some of these include the fact that the model code included a new level of electric vehicle parking requirement, which was called EV capable light. This level of EV infrastructure is similar to EV capable spaces, except that EV capable light spaces do not require electrical panel capacity. For most of the commercial parking lots with more than 10 spaces, the model code requires more EV ready spaces and fewer EV installed spaces than Brimfield had required. For multifamily development, the amount of EV installed spaces is slightly higher at about 5% versus what Brimfield was requiring with 4% for parking spaces, parking lots with more than 26 spaces. The municipal code also had a specific requirement that multifamily residential development that's offered for sale, so condominiums, be treated more like single-family residential, and then provide one EV-ready space per unit, and that is not in the model code. So based on these differences and after discussion with ACES in July, staff analyzed the differences and is including a local amendment in this ordinance that's under consideration to strengthen the model code to more closely match the electric vehicle parking requirements that are currently in Title 17. So we included a few tables in the staff memorandum with various comparisons of the current code requirements as well as the state model code. We also tried to include some comparisons of projects that have been recently approved to show how the various parking requirements would be applicable and would be different or hopefully would be very similar between those projects under the model code with the local amendments and under the Title 17 current requirements. So this screen or on the screen is showing what the proposed table is included with this ordinance as it's presented this evening. And in addition to these changes in the table, staff has drafted the ordinance to leave in the requirements for the EV parking to be shown on site plans that's currently required, and for condominiums to have one EV ready space per unit. Next slide, please. In the staff memorandum, we provided some links to available information regarding costs associated with moving towards electric ready, electric preferred, and electric only. And it was structured like that since it was how we had previously prepared information for City Council's consideration, the study session. Much of the data available relates primarily to residential construction, as previously noted. We acknowledge that there are costs associated with all of the construction requirements associated with the model code. There will be financial savings and efficiency, but the savings will likely take years to recoup. Although there is not information available regarding the costs associated with the state model code, we believe in our estimate, our very rough estimate, that it's about $6,500 per residential unit, including the EV, solar, and electric ready components. But that's, again, a pretty rough estimate. Next slide, please. Staff is including 2 local amendments to strengthen the model code. The first, as I mentioned, was regarding those electric vehicle parking requirements to try to closely match what Broomfield already has in place. The second is related to the ability for some projects to request a waiver from the model code requirements. Under the state model code, electric ready and solar ready code, a developer of a large commercial building, so that's greater than 10,000 square feet, could request a waiver of the model code requirements if they felt that it was substantially cost prohibitive for their project. And under the state model code, that is very, very specifically defined as exceeding 1% of total mechanical, electric, and plumbing construction costs, inclusive of material and labor. The burden of proof is of course on the applicant to provide that there's a cost differential that could be quotes or other licensed design analysis. But the waiver process would likely create a very significant administrative burden for staff to try and negotiate how to potentially reduce costs while trying to ensure adequate compliance. It's also complicated by the fact that Broomfield already requires most new developments to include the electric vehicle ready requirements because of Title 17. So staff is including that local amendment just to remove that waiver. And again, that was only applicable to large commercial over 10,000 square feet. Staff is not including any change to the waiver that's provided within the model code regarding buildings that could be impacted by a natural disaster. There are a few other minor changes made to the model code, but most of those are related to administrative requirements, which are revised to make sure that our current, the language matches what we currently use for administration of the building codes. Next slide, please. Staff brought the roadmap to ACES for the Energy Code Roadmap to ACES for their input and recommendation earlier this year. And their recommendation was to move forward quickly with the state model energy code, which is why it's before you this evening. And we believe we are one of the first communities to consider moving to the model electric code, or I'm sorry, the model code. Staff brought the model code back to ACES in July after it had been finalized by the state in June. And based on that review, ACES supported the local amendment related to the waiver from the requirements based on financial impact and a local amendment to have the EV requirements modified. They also asked staff to continue refining and finalizing the tables shown at that meeting, which was completed and are included with the staff memorandum for this evening. Next slide, please. So we've approved on first reading, the ordinance 2216 would be published in full and a public hearing will be scheduled for August 22nd. As drafted, the effective date of the ordinance would be January 1st of 2024. And that's a lot to allow time for applicants that are currently in the development review process to modify their construction plans prior to the effective date. And that concludes staff's presentation. And as mentioned, Mr. Pate and I are here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Burton-Zetti. We'll now proceed with public comments, starting with in person. If there's anyone who would like to be heard on this item, please come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Next is folks on the phone. Nobody's on the phone. Questions from city council are next. So members should limit themselves to questions during this portion, and the time to introduce amendments for or against this item is later. Are there any questions from council? Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one question, actually. On the amendment to make the model code similar to our already code on EV, the EV capable light space, are we leaving that in the model, in the code, or are we taking that out?
Thank you, council member. In most instances, we took it out. We did leave it for the multifamily because the model code required a very high number of EV capable light beyond what Brimfield had been requiring. So I believe 30% of the EV capable light would remain. They had required 40%, but we moved 10% of those EV infrastructure up to EV ready to try and match our code. So it strengthens the requirement requiring more. The total amount of EV infrastructure is much higher, a percentage of parking for multifamily under this code. But as you're pointing out, probably that a lot of it's in that EV capable light.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other council member questions? I don't see any more questions and I don't have any questions. So next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2216 on first reading. Will the clerk please read proposed ordinance number 2216 by title?
11A, ordinance number 2216, adopting the Colorado Model Electric Ready and Solar Ready Code with an effective date of January 1st, 2024.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember Leslie?
I move that ordinance number 2216 be adopted.
Thank you. And is there a second? Councilmember Lim? Second. My script's a little messed up, but I know what happens next. All right. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Lim?
I would like to thank the staff for bringing this to ACES in stages so that the group could consider that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Leslie?
Yeah, I want to congratulate staff for having a bit more aggressive goals than the state policy here. I'm really pleased that Manager Hoffman, you and your team are working diligently to achieve something that the council has been very interested in. So thank you for that.
You're welcome, and right back at council, because we would not be moving forward with the recommendation if not for staff, for council direction.
Yes. All right. Any other council member discussion on this item? All right. Well, all in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Pate and Ms. Burton-Zetti and Ms. Thiemann. Next, under council business, don't go anywhere yet, is council's consideration on first reading of proposed ordinance number 2218 and 2221 relating to residential fire sprinkler system requirements. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum and I'll ask our staff to summarize.
I feel like so often it truly is the Anna Burton-Zetti City and County of Broomfield show pretty consistently. Ms. Burton-Zetti, please walk us through this item. And again, our much sought after Tim Pate is also in the audience, and we're sure grateful for that. Ms. Brunzetti.
All right, good evening again, Mayor, City Council. If I could have the next slide, please. So this topic first came up when we were considering the 2021 code package back in February of this year. And at that time of the 2021 code package, which includes the 2021 residential code, it included a local amendment to allow townhouses, single-family and paired homes to be built without fire sprinkler systems. Broomfield has had this local amendment in place since this requirement was first added to the International Residential Code in about 2009. Staff evaluated the factors at that time back in February that were originally used to justify the local amendment and determined it would be appropriate to bring back the fire sprinkler system requirement local amendment for additional discussion. That additional discussion took place in June of this year. And based on the feedback from that study session, staff has drafted proposed ordinance 2221. Next slide, please. When initially considering the local amendment, a number of factors were considered as listed on the screen. One of those was the cost of fire sprinkler systems. There is a potential savings as well for those who have fire sprinkler systems installed. We have estimated that to be about $160 to $175 per year on their home insurance. But the costs at the time of construction can add about $6,000 to $8,000 or $9,000 for about a 2,000 to 3,000 square foot home. There's potential additional costs of $4,000 to $5,000 for homes built in subdivisions, not anticipating the need of a 1-inch water tap for each home. So those additional $4,000 to $5,000 costs associated with those houses include a fire pump and potential for fire storage tank and water storage tank installation. Another point would be the necessity to contract with a fire sprinkler contractor, which adds additional cost. Baseline and other companies have found local fire sprinkler systems contractors to do installation in new homes. This doesn't seem to be as significant an issue as it was many years ago when first adopting the 2009 code. It remains a limited availability of plumbing contractors that may be willing to install residential fire sprinkler systems, but there are fire contractors that are willing to install them. There also, back in 2009, when we were considering this, we believe there was impact on staff resources for administering this fire sprinkler requirement. But based on experience with the builders installing the system in Baseline, we do not believe that this is an issue any longer. Both Brimfield and North Metro staff are able to accomplish the reviews for these subdivisions. And with existing resources, we believe that we can administer the requirement for all single family paired homes and townhomes to have the systems installed. Next slide, please. Some, but certainly not all, communities have enforced the fire sprinkler system requirements in the residential code. One of note is Lafayette, which requires fire sprinklers, but exempts out accessory dwellings if the primary home does not have fire sprinkler system already installed, and subdivisions where their water taps are already installed that do not support the fire sprinkler system. They also exempted out short-term rentals, but based on Brimfield's existing short-term rental requirements, the fire sprinkler system would not be required if an existing home was utilized for a short-term rental. Next slide, please. So there are two ordinances that are proposed this evening. The first is ordinance 2218, which is needed to fix a clerical error in the original ordinance that was approved back in February for 2205. The proposed ordinance will effectively add back the local amendment allowing townhouses, single-family attached and single-family detached homes to be built without a fire sprinkler system, which was deleted in error in the final ordinance. This will allow the local amendment to remain in place until the effective date of ordinance 2221. Next slide, please. There we go. The second ordinance under consideration is ordinance number 2221, which would be a specific action by City Council to consider removing the local amendment regarding residential fire sprinkler systems for townhouses, paired homes, and single-family residential homes with 3 exceptions. And I should note, we do need both ordinances, even if the ultimate decision is to move towards 2221, since it was fully in the record and in the memorandum and during discussion, it was fully intended that the local amendment would remain in place back when the original ordinance 2205 was approved. Staff is, as I mentioned, suggesting 3 local amendments. The first is regarding accessory dwelling units. These units are limited in Brimfield to no more than 800 square feet. And if a residential fire sprinkler system was required for an ADU that was serviced by a 3/4 inch tap, then it's likely the homeowner would have to install both a fire pump and a water tank. And accommodating that type of equipment that's rather large and bulky within such a small square footage and adding that additional cost, the $4,000 to $5,000 that's added in addition for that type of equipment, can make it challenging for the homeowner to be able to potentially move forward with an ADU. So staff has included an exemption for accessory dwelling units. The second exemption is for home additions and alterations when the existing home does not already have a fire sprinkler system. It's given the cost to retrofit homes for automatic sprinkler systems. Staff felt that this could make improvements to homes prohibitively expensive and warrant consideration of a local amendment. Finally, the third exception would be the consideration of homes that are built on lots with existing infrastructure that is deemed not adequate to accommodate a fire sprinkler system. This would be typically when homes are serviced by 3/4 inch taps, but the home builder would need to provide additional evidence to support why a particular home with a particular lot configuration would not be able to support a fire sprinkler system due to the inadequacy of the existing infrastructure in place. We do not believe that this would be widely utilized, but it could be considered for portions of some developments that are under construction, such as Dillon Point, especially potentially the townhome areas where the lots are very small and located very close to the street. And could also be applicable for other small infill areas where there's already existing infrastructure installed. Larger infill lots and new developments, infill lots, for example, north of 144th Avenue in the Wilcox area, many of those areas have infrastructure that's capable of supporting fire sprinkler systems. So again, it would be a rare exception, but it is included in the draft ordinance this evening. Next slide, please. There were some communications that were submitted on this project, and they're included in the correspondence folder that's linked to the memorandum. One of the residents had suggested that staff provide some pictures of existing systems, and it was such a great suggestion. So we are providing some examples today. These pictures were provided from some existing homes that are under construction in Brimfield in the baseline development. The upper left is a ceiling showing a sprinkler head in a typical residential application. The other 2 pictures show the orange pipe where the sprinkler system is installed within the home. The 2 homes are obviously just beginning construction, so it's easier to see the installation areas. The next slide. Since the memorandum and my presentation mentioned the water storage tanks and pumps, I thought it was appropriate to also include some example images of 300-gallon water tanks. Again, this is not standard, and we include this just to help illustrate the conversation for the sake of conversation. As you can see, accessory dwelling units would be very difficult to accommodate something of this size inside an 800 square foot unit. So just really for that purpose, this is not typical and would not be standard in applications of new residential fire sprinkler systems under this code. Next slide, please. Following our standards, we set up multiple ways to try and engage with the public regarding and the development community regarding this proposal. We held our developer meeting in early June, which was attended by a few builders, and as noted in the meeting notes, we added to the correspondence file. There were some concerns mentioned by the Home Builders Association and Brightland Homes. They also submitted letters. Concerns expressed included the increased costs for new home buyers and whether there was a desire for fire sprinkler improvements. Brightland also referenced the increased costs and loss of usable floor area with homes that had to accommodate a pump and water storage tank if the existing water tap was not sized in anticipation of a fire sprinkler system. And again, that's the Dillon Point community. North Metro Fire Rescue also provided some letters of support, as well as responses for some of the Home Builder Association letter and some of the questions that were raised by some of the residents. Next slide, please. If approved on first reading, these ordinances will be scheduled for a public hearing on August 22nd of this year. The effective date for ordinance number 2218 would be 7 days from the publication, and ordinance number 2221 would have an effective date of January 1st of 2024. And again, that's to allow projects that are within the development review pipeline to be able to modify their plans prior to the effective date of the ordinance. That concludes staff's presentation. I'll note North Metro Fire Rescue also has staff in attendance. They also have some additional slides with information that may be helpful as answering questions, and they're happy to share that when requested.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ms. Burton-Zetti. We'll now proceed with public comments, starting with in-person. Please step up to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, John Ewalt, Pinnacle North. I would like to thank Deputy Fire Marshal Waller for answering the questions I raised about this issue. The answers were thorough and addressed all of my questions from a technical and functional point of view. My only remaining questions that he could answer are about how the fires were counted and the populations being covered in the numbers that he published, but I'm happy with the information provided. Working backwards from the numbers, it seems that around 29,400 houses were used in the calculations, which is likely all homes in Broomfield, and means that every year there are fires in 0.14% of the houses in Broomfield. Using these numbers, and Deputy Marshal Waller can correct me if I'm wrong, there have been 10 fire-related injuries and 2 fatalities over the past 10 years. I don't have data on the age of the homes or how the fires were caused, fires that caused the deaths were started, so I cannot say if the deaths would have been prevented even with a fire sprinkler system installed, and it is always hard to draw conclusions from 2 events over 10 years. I'm not disputing the fact that fire sprinklers can control a fire and keep occupants safer in the event of a fire than when there is no fire suppression system present. What I am challenging is the real cost being mandated with this ordinance versus the potential benefits. Using Broomfield's numbers, the payback period on the cost of the fire suppression system through reduced insurance premiums is 36 to 50 years. This is an extremely long payoff period, and I do not think there are any other single fire safety building code requirements that have such high costs. For example, arc fault circuit interrupters, while expensive, cost hundreds of dollars for a house, not thousands, and they prevent around 25,000 house fires every year in the US, according to the National Fire Protection Association. Bottom line, if you vote yes on 2221, you are going to force a $5,000 to $10,000 cost increase on every new 1 and 2 family house built in Broomfield. Not to mention the cost will likely be mortgaged and incur interest for the life of the mortgage. And for what benefit? It may, and I stress may, save 1 life over 10 years. Nobody wants to put a price on a life, but we do it every day through our actions. For example, in that same 10-year period, how many preventable deaths occurred in Broomfield that we did little or nothing about? How many accidental poisonings or falls or other home-related deaths could have been prevented with significant and costly regulation? A price has been put on a life whether we like it or not. I must also add, nobody is prevented from installing a fire sprinkler system if they want one. Fire sprinkler systems exist in Broomfield, and applying for a permit is no longer breaking new ground. The barrier to adding a system to a new build is much lower than it once was or was perceived to be. If the market believes sprinkler systems present more benefit than they cost, the market will demand sprinklers installed in new houses, and builders will respond. Forcing this on everyone when the cost-benefit analysis doesn't work out is bad policy. Instead, educate residents and let them decide what is best for them. I know this can feel scary, but if you give people information and trust them to make the right decision, most oftentimes they will. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any more comments? All right. Thank you. And then questions from City Council are next. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion, and the time to introduce amendments and state positions for or against this item is later. Are there any questions from council? Councilmember Leslie, then Chef, then Lim.
I'm not sure who I should direct this to, so Ms. Burton-Zetti, I'll just home extinguishers. Many of us have them in the kitchen, say, for example, because water can actually cause a counterproductive response to a grease fire or something like that, which is more common in the kitchens. And so we have special home extinguishers. I'm just wondering if maybe encouraging people to get extinguishers in several rooms of the house would be a more effective and less costly approach to, and you may not be able to answer this, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but if someone might be able to answer that, I would appreciate that.
Looking around the room, there they are. I think it would be a great question. I'm not sure if they can answer it either, but I'll ask our partners at North Metro Fire Rescue to address the question.
Good evening, Mayor, staff, and council. Fair question, but obviously a fire extinguisher introduces a human element. So there are maintenance issues associated with those extinguishers. They got to be in the right place. It has to be the human home when the fire starts. So it's really a little bit of an apples and oranges kind of thing. Fire extinguishers are great. We're certainly going to advocate for those and the proper training to use them in the proper application. But it's really not a substitute for automatic fire protection systems that are included in the built environment that are going to work regardless of the presence of humans, whether they're awake, sleeping, under the influence of anything.
So I guess the kind of second part of that is what I said about grease fires, whatever, that a water system may actually not be as effective suppressing as a certain kind of a gas or whatever that you'd have in a kitchen extinguisher. Is that?
There are
Do I
different
understand that?
types of extinguishing agents for specific fires. However, in a common residential home, water that would come out of the fire sprinklers that are over your heads or proposed to be included in these new developments is the best extinguishing agent all around.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor. So a question for staff and then a question for the North Metro Fire and Rescue. In looking at the fire sprinkler systems ordinance, or actually just in looking at fire sprinkler systems, it seems that there is both internal as well as external systems for fire mitigation. With this ordinance, this is just focused on those internal fire sprinkler systems. Is that correct?
Councilmember Chef, that's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, staff. So attending the National Night Out event for many years, and I thank you for continuing to put those on and your participation in that. I viewed the fire demonstration numerous times, and you know, it's always a highlight for everyone there in terms of you know, getting to see what that looks like and getting to see firefighters in action. I think that's a great benefit to our community. So thank you for doing that. But you know, looking at this, you know, it really showcases the difference between a non-sprinklered home and a sprinklered home. You know, so it's obvious the benefits of an internal sprinkler system when the fire starts inside the home. During a wildfire event, such as the Marshall Fire, I would imagine an internal sprinkler system could significantly reduce the damage to that internal side of that home when that fire finally reaches the inside of the home. I'm curious, do you know if any of the homes impacted by the Marshall Fire had a sprinkler system installed?
Getting a shaking head from Tim Pate because he knows more about it than I do. There's a high likelihood because Louisville and Superior had fire sprinkler requirements, Boulder County. But I can't say for sure if they did. However, for the sake of full transparency, the sprinkler systems that we're talking about tonight are really not designed to prevent exterior fire, like a conflagration like the Marshall Fire. That was a unique set of circumstances that, I mean, even manual firefighting was extremely challenged to put out. Those types of fires that we see in Canada right now, California, are really only extinguished by weather, despite the best efforts from well-trained, world-class fire departments all over the world.
All right, so it sounds like that if any of those homes did have an internal fire sprinkler system, it may not have affected the spread of that wildfire.
May not have had a significant effect on the outcome. However, anecdotally, I do know I've heard from the fire chief who was involved in the operations of that there were instances where fires were suppressed by homes that weren't sprinklered, but had their interior plumbing water melt and break, and just so happened to be in the right place at the right time to suppress the fire. So it's hard to say whether they would have a definite impact on a fire situation like the Marshall Fire.
Okay.
Honestly.
Thanks. That's all I have, Mayor, at this time.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Lim.
Yes, in the North Metro letter dated May 2nd, 2023, which was your initial letter of support. It cites support for the fire sprinkler systems as significantly reducing the threat of injury to emergency responders. Can you explain how that's the case?
Sure thing. Good question. So the firefighters who respond, they obviously don't arrive on scene immediately. We get the call from 911, the dispatch center processes it. We get the call, we put our equipment on, we get in the apparatus and we drive. That takes us anywhere from 4 to 10 minutes. And in that time, the fire is developing unchecked without the presence of a sprinkler system. So when you have a sprinkler system installed and operative, by that same timeline, the firefighters are arriving to a much smaller fire than would otherwise be if there were no sprinkler system. And the timeline for fires now has gotten extremely compressed. Fires 20, 30 years ago burned slower because we had different materials burning. We had looser homes. The homes now are extremely tight. Products of combustion are not released to the atmosphere. They're concentrated. So the chances that firefighters are arriving early in the incipient stages of a fire in today's fire environment and in new homes is very low. They're usually arriving right about the time that we reach a point called flashover, with Councilmember Shaft's familiar with that with the demonstration. Nothing survives flashover. Even our firefighters in their protective gear can't survive flashover. That's when everything in the compartment is on fire and is burning and temperatures are in the 2000 to 2500 degree Fahrenheit range. So a sprinkler system is going to control that fire and allow emergency responders to get there with a smaller fire, put the fire out with less water, and also expose them to less of a hazard. The larger fire that's on site when our firefighters get there, there's a greater chance for injury or harm, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. There was a question about why not allow a resident to negotiate on their own with a builder to decide whether they install the sprinkler system. Did North Metro have any, or staff have any comments in response to that?
So Councilmember, I will say that does occur today. Home builders have the option of providing fire sprinkler systems within their homes. They also have the option to provide it as an option to home purchasers. And so in that way, it is currently an option for homeowners that wanted to seek it out. The difference is under this code, it would become a requirement for the home builders to provide it.
And why did Baseline, as I understand, in the one set of townhomes decide to require the sprinklers as well? You know, they automatically put the sprinklers in their townhomes.
I'm not sure if, do you want to speak to that?
So in the course of the development process, it was agreed upon to sprinkler all residential products in Baseline East as a trade-off to basically allowing more denser, more number of units per lot. And there was a relaxing of some of the fire code requirements in order to do that. So our access to the structures was a trade-off to providing sprinklers throughout, as an example. The number of fire hydrants they needed to provide is reduced. So it was trade-offs like that that incentivized them to sprinkler that entire community.
Okay. Did Baseline provide much resistance to the idea that the sprinklers, that they would have to require the sprinklers?
I would say not really. We'd worked with the development team on Baseline West, where we had the challenges that they were looking to get around. So they arrived at the decision mostly on their own that to expedite the process, they would just sprinkler everything.
There was also a question in, I think a resident's email about maintenance costs for sprinkler systems. And I noted the staff memo says that there typically aren't maintenance costs related to the sprinkler systems. Does North Metro have a comment on that?
Sure, fair question. Because you want to know the full cost picture when you're getting into something. There is no maintenance costs on a residential fire sprinkler system. It's not to say that there couldn't be, but it's the same as you would have like with your normal household plumbing system. You know, there's no regular maintenance on your sink or your toilet. If something breaks, you have to fix it, yes, but there's no requirement for an annual checkoff or an annual inspection that's prescribed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. I've been sitting here wondering about this issue of accidental activation. How often that happens, because if my fire alarm goes off, I have the irritation of trying to figure out which one it is and a migraine, but no damage. But an accidental activation of the smoke alarm, a water sprinkler system could be worse than the fire. So, it sort of comes back to the issue of maintenance and are we over responding to a fire danger and the potential threat of damage from these systems? And I just say that because I have enough trouble keeping my ice maker from leaking and causing damage. The idea of having a water system like this around my house makes me a little nervous, especially if I had kids, since it's activated by heat and corrosion and any number of causes. So can you talk to the lifespan of these systems and the threat of accidental activation and flooding your home?
Sure thing. Again, another fair question. Sprinklers have been around for over 100 years. They're proven to be very reliable. They do not accidentally activate. I don't have off the top of my head the statistics. I'm sure I could find them. The numbers are in the low single digits, I'm certain. And the way they operate is they're mechanically operated. So it's a gasket, it's a fusible link, and they're sealed systems. In fact, there was a study recently that the community of Scottsdale, Arizona has had residential sprinkler systems on the books for decades. And they recently did some research on some of the first homes that were provided with residential sprinklers, which were in the early to mid 80s. And audits of those systems showed that they were still fully operational and there hasn't been any reliability or issues where homeowners have said, well, it's leaking, so I'm going to take it out of service and I'm not going to have to worry about it. They're still reliable to this day, as are their plumbing systems. So it shouldn't be that much of a surprise.
Is there a distinction in that, Arizona doesn't have a lot of heat and cold where we do?
That is true.
Right. So I would think there would be some level of maintenance and to maintain these, or make sure they're still operating after a number of years without.
It's really more a question of making sure the installation is done correctly and the insulation of the installation is done correctly. Okay. Because if you don't insulate the pipes, just like your plumbing, if they're put on an exterior wall and there's no insulation, you're going to have the high likelihood of there being a issue.
To that point, that's a good segue because it was mentioned in the memo about the availability of plumbing folks who have sufficient expertise, and that might be a problem. I don't know if that was the city addressed that. I don't know if you have comments on if we require this for everyone, it might be a substantial hurdle to find professionals to do this, that this wouldn't necessarily slow down construction.
Hi, Tim Pate.
It's our understanding, doing the research to prepare for this latest proposal, is we have found two plumbing contractors that have been able to answer our questions, that are willing to take on doing these multi-purpose residential. And the input that we received from other plumbers is that they were not willing to do it because they were not willing to get the additional liability insurance that would go along with that. Not that they probably couldn't easily install the systems, but more from an insurance standpoint was the feedback that we were getting. Did that answer?
So it's not the expertise, it's the liability.
But there are numerous fire sprinkler contractors that's what they do for a business, both residential and commercial.
All right. And one last question I wanted to ask in terms of, I had brought this up during the study session, you know, that water systems usually required in multifamily or hotels, for example, because the mode of escape, it takes you longer to get out of a hotel than, you know, the alert that a smoke alarm gives you in a normal single family home. You should have time to leave, or you could leave a second floor window and not necessarily be harmed. But so my question in this sense, I would be more inclined if this was maybe just limited to townhomes or buildings that have 3 stories where you do have a longer route of escape. And maybe that's when a water system might really come into effect more so than a smoke alarm. Do you think there's any validity to that thought, that is more useful in use of the sprinkler system?
Another fair question. The time to escape, as Councilmember Schaaf can attest to after watching the demonstration, is a lot less than you'd think. We're getting, I'll say, a small room to flash over and be uninhabitable in under 2 minutes. I would challenge anyone in this room to get up, get out of their house in under 2 minutes in the dark, in an environment that there's smoke and products of combustion. It's not going to happen. And that's in a relatively small house. You know, we don't mandate houses sizing necessarily. So the idea of a townhouse being more complicated to exit than a single family, I don't think has really value. So I think, you know, the fire problem that we see and is seen across the nation is a home fire problem. That's where we're getting injuries and loss of life. And this is really the way to put the biggest dent in that fire problem. Chief, did you want to add anything?
You know, probably we can go through a few slides. We do have a few slides if you'd like to see them, because I think what that demonstrates is the true efficiency of the systems. It shows and demonstrates, you know, with a lot of history and a lot of time, the true reduction in deaths and injuries in fires. And so it might be worth walking through that quickly if you'd like to see that. I'd also add just a little detail to the comments that came just before that, your question, sir. And it was regarding really what are the challenges with development. And I think we don't have to go too far. In the city of Westminster, they've had this code in effect for more than a decade. And they report having really not much trouble getting builders to find contractors to install the systems. It hasn't slowed their demand for their homes. It hasn't slowed construction. It hasn't been the weak link. And I think we've talked about it already, but costs get reduced many, many times because in the total system of developing, particularly in a neighborhood where the desire may be to place more homes on a limited space, which is in high demand today. When you have the opportunity to do that by sprinkling buildings, which allows you to do different things in the codes, place homes closer together, space hydrants further apart, not provide around a townhome 360 access like up in Baseline, then a builder finds it becomes an economical trade-off to put in the sprinkler systems by reducing other costs. And so from the city of Westminster, they don't really have evidence, but they surmise that their homes market price to the person buying that house isn't really much higher than their neighbors. And they don't find that people
are crossing the border to somewhere that doesn't have sprinklers in their home. They're finding people who move to the community because it does have the addition of the sprinkler systems. And so they're pretty adamant about that. They've reported that over the decades, their cost that is recorded by the contractors who come in, submit their plans, and the fees charged based on how much the project costs. So they've got a lot of data on actual costs, is roughly $2 a square foot. So that's historical from communities around us. That's been our experience too. And so I think there's some data that we're probably not talking about. There's some trade-offs to that side. But the biggest thing for us in that cost benefit analysis is it is hard to put a price on a life, but probably the data in the presentation helps punctuate just how safe sprinkler systems are, how reliable they are, and what they do for saving lives. That's why we're strong advocates, is because that's the strong part. For us, the fire department, we care more about saving lives even than the property, but you'll notice in the slides that it works exceptionally well for saving properties as well. So I think if you're up to it, we'd let Chief Gosselin go through a few of those slides.
Please, Chief, we'd like to see it.
Okay, we'll go through these quick to not belabor the issue. So this slide, what we're going to do is we're going to go through sort of data that's district wide for North Metro, because again, we serve other communities other than Broomfield. So this is entire to our district. Then we're going to zoom in on Broomfield, and then we're going to put some nationwide data up there just to kind of give you a little segue. So this slide is for our entire district, and it's over a 10-year period from 2013 to 2022. And this is just home fires, and how we define home fires is in the small italicized text there. It's basically 1 and 2 family homes, manufactured housing, apartments, and other multifamily homes. So apartment complexes, condos, that sort of thing. So in that 10-year period, we've experienced 751 total home fire incidents. And the breakdown between 1 and 2 family dwellings and multifamily is as you see there, 407 fires in 1 and 2 family dwellings and 344 in multifamily dwellings. So total number of fires in the 10-year period. As far as which ones had sprinklers and which ones didn't, that's the lower table. The majority of, no surprise, of them occurred, 665 of them in structures without fire sprinkler systems, and 86 occurred in structures with fire sprinkler systems, and the breakdown as you see there on the table. Next slide, please. This again, still district-wide data over the 10-year period, but deaths and injuries and property loss. And here's where you'll see some stark contrast. So homes with sprinklers, you'll see there are no civilian deaths and no civilian injuries in 1 and 2 family dwellings, 4 in multifamily. And the loss valuation cumulative is as seen in that table, $2,002 and $213,000 and $213,089. Homes without fire sprinklers, deaths, injuries, property loss. You look at the numbers and the loss valuation jumps out at you. In 1 and 2 family dwellings, it's almost $11 million in damage over that same period. Multifamily, $1 million. And we have 5 civilian deaths spread as follows: 1 in multifamily, 4 in 1 or 2 family dwellings, and the injuries, 17 in 1 and 2 family dwellings and 4 in multifamily dwellings. So there's an extreme difference between the value lost in sprinklered and non-sprinklered properties district-wide. Going into Broomfield, next slide, please. So this is just Broomfield data for the same period and the same types of fires, home fires. So narrows it down, 316 incidents, 171 of those in 1 and 2 family dwellings, 145 in multifamily, 250 occurred in structures with no sprinklers, 66 fires in structures with sprinklers, And the data breakdown of the types without and with sprinklers are below. Next slide, please. Going to deaths, injuries, and property loss, specifically for Broomfield home fires, we see homes with sprinklers, again, no civilian deaths. Four incidents with injuries. The loss valuation, again, very low, $2,000 in 1 and 2 family dwellings, $81,000 in multifamily dwellings. That's cumulative over the 10-year period. Homes without sprinklers, we look at those same categories. We're at over $6 million in loss and 121,000 in multifamily. So stark contrast in those dollar loss values. Next slide. These are sort of really powerful facts that help Councilmember Cohen with his questions about reliability and how effective are these systems. Next slide, please. So this is, I will say, it's for all occupancy. So we were just talking about home fires, residential fires in the earlier slides. This includes all occupancies with fire sprinklers. So group Bs, like business occupancies, like what we are here, assembly occupancies, restaurants, mercantile, big box warehouses, that kind of thing. We've got a lot of data on those types of facilities because sprinklers have been required in them for multiple decades. So the effectiveness is incredible. So compared to reported fires in properties where there is no fire sprinkler system, when you have a fire sprinkler system, the civilian fire death and injury rate are severely reduced. The civilian fire death rate is 89% lower, and the civilian injury rate is 27% lower. Pretty significant. Firefighter injuries are 60% lower when you have a sprinkler system in a facility and when you don't, for when we're conducting extinguishment efforts, search, rescue efforts. Fire spread is confined to the object and room of origin. That's basically the space in which the fire started. In 95% of reported structure fires in which sprinkler systems were present. And from 2015 to 2019, sprinklers operated in 92% of such fires and were effective at controlling the fire in 96% of the incidents when they operated. And the most common reason that sprinklers failed to operate was, you guessed it, someone shut it off, the human element. We introduced the human element and nullified the benefits of the sprinkler system. As far as how many heads go off when there are fires, one sprinkler is usually enough to control a fire. 77% of the structure fires, all structure fires, were only involved the operation of one sprinkler head. In 97%, 5 or fewer sprinkler heads operated, and in 99%, 10 or fewer operated. Now, keep in mind, these are commercial, these include commercial fires. In a residence, you're going to have 1, maybe 2 sprinkler heads go off at most. And each one of those heads is going to flow between 10 and 15 gallons a minute. Next slide. Taking that same data, but now just looking at home fires. From 2015 to 2019, civilian death and injury rates from home fires were 88 and 28% lower. And average property loss per home fire was 62% lower in home fires where sprinklers were present compared to the homes where there weren't any sprinklers present. Firefighter injuries were further reduced by 78%. Fire spread was confined to the object and again, the room of origin in 97% of reported home fires in which sprinkler systems were present. And in 89% of the home fires with operating sprinklers, only 1 operated. In virtually 100%, 5 or fewer operated, 99.5%. They can't say 100, but it's effectively 100. Next slide, please. So in fires involving homes with sprinklers versus no sprinklers, you're almost 100% reduction in civilian death, 88% reduction in civilian death in homes with sprinklers compared to homes without sprinklers. And I think if you click, I'll get another bullet. Yeah, there's some animation on this one. Firefighter injuries were reduced by 78% in homes with sprinklers compared to homes without sprinklers. Next slide. Property loss, 62% lower. 62% lower average property loss in homes with sprinklers compared to homes without sprinklers. It's a pretty significant difference. Next slide. And that's kind of the basic number stuff that we wanted to provide on the effectiveness of it. And with some local data in there as well, because you hear a lot about nationwide, but how does that translate to local is always important. So if there's any additional questions, we're happy to answer based on that.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was very eye-opening. We were on Councilmember Cohen. Any more questions based on that? Okay, then we'll go to Councilmember Anderson.
I was going to ask about the freezing of pipes, but I think you have it answered right there with proper insulation. So is that true? Like, okay, so I guess the question here, there's a email question that came in regarding the freezing of pipes. And is that problematic? And I guess it would come more into play when your heat goes out, your furnace goes out in the dead of winter on the super cold day. Is that enough to cause those pipes to freeze?
Again, it depends on where the insulation is placed. I would say that the freezing of pipes is going to be no more common than the freezing of your domestic plumbing. Is there a chance? Yes. But is it likely? I would say no.
Okay. And then there's also a question about like the childproof part of if somebody, an example is given of a basketball in Paul Durda Rec Center that was able to set up a sprinkler, but is that if you hit these sprinkler heads, your kids are playing around the house, hit them with something, would they go off or is it just heat?
They can be activated mechanically. However, directly above you, that's what you would see. And that little plate is basically soldered to a base. So you'd have to hit that really hard for that mechanical force to break the metal solder to get that to fall off. And even if that did, that white cover plate behind that is the fusible link that is heat activated. So you can think of that as almost a deflector that's going to take the initial impact and it's still not going to activate. You could knock that sprinkler deflector off. It's called an escutcheon, but the activating element is actually behind that. So that's not going to activate the sprinkler.
Okay, so they're really, and just to let you know, those slides were super, super helpful. Like I wish we would have seen that at the beginning. I think that would help a lot of us to understand just how many lives can be saved. And we do have one of those homes where by the time if I was to try to get to my son's bedroom and back down to the stairs and it would be, there's no way we're going out those windows. We're 3 stories up. So I wish we had sprinklers in our house. Unfortunately, we do not. And I do have a question. I think this one is for staff. There was a estimate of $270 to $290 per square foot cost in baseline. And is that all inclusive? Is that just the installation of the pipes or does that include the design, the drawings, everything, all of there's some questions about what does that really include?
That data is taken from the home builders that the fire sprinkler contractor turns in, and that would be a turnkey, all-inclusive cost to put the system in from the where it ties into the domestic water line in the water line room with all the heads.
All right, thank you. I think that's all the questions I have.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few quick questions for North Metro Fire, and then I think I have one for staff. Continuing on the note of accidental set off, what is the exact temperature that the fire heads activate at? Obviously, if you start a little tiny fire and you can control it, I would hope that I know it won't go off. I live in an apartment complex that has incidents like that, so.
Fair question. There's different temperatures for different hazards. Your standard head is going to be between 135 degrees Fahrenheit and 155 degrees. That's what they're labeled as. By the time the temperature at the ceiling is reaching that temperature, obviously the fire itself is going to be hotter, but so those are the temperatures that we'll see in a common residential application, 135 degrees Fahrenheit and 155 degrees Fahrenheit. If you have an area that warrants a higher temperature head, such as a skylight or a heat source, they have additional other heads that are rated for higher temperatures, 175, 225 degrees. So you try to suit the head to the environment in which it's likely going to be situated.
Okay, thank you. What are the differences between multifamily units that have fire suppression systems, automated sprinklers, and what's proposed in this ordinance, if there are any? I'm very familiar with multifamily because I live in one. I have sprinklers in my apartment. Have never had a problem. But are there any differences in terms of the way they're installed, the types of materials used to install them, and et cetera?
Generally, no. There's a different installation standard, but effectively they're the same type of system. They're both going to involve the same temperature rating head. The coverage area of the heads is generally the same. And the quick response nature of the heads is the same in a multifamily apartment setting versus a single family or duplex or town.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. I think this is a question I have for staff. I know in the presentation, it was mentioned that there was an additional cost of $6,000 to $9,000 for a system like this. Was that number calculated from what it would cost to install a home right now if it was existing, or was that for a new build and you had spread that cost out over, let's say, 150 units? Because I know typically you have economies of scale when you start putting in a lot of things.
Thank you. That cost was derived from an individual new home builder or a new home permit. So when a builder, where I was deriving that information was from the builders who are currently in the baseline subdivision who are doing the sprinkler systems. And when they turn the permit application in, they put in the valuation for the fire sprinkler. So whether the fire sprinkler contractor may be doing all of their homes, say for Berkeley, for example, but they're not doing them all at once. So I don't know if they'd be contracting with the builder to say, okay, this is what we're going to do for 200 homes. I don't have that answer. So it would be like a one house valuation.
All right, thank you. Those are all my questions, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Any other council member questions? I don't have any questions either. I was just checking my notes. That was very, very chock full of information. All right. Well, next is council's consideration. Thank you all so much. Proposed ordinance number 2218 on first reading. And this is the clerical error fix. Will the clerk please read proposed ordinance number 2218 by title?
11B, ordinance number 2218, amending section 15-05, the International Residential Code of the Broomfield Municipal Code, reestablishing local amendment.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember Ward.
I move that ordinance number 2218 be adopted on first reading and order published in full, that a public hearing and second reading of the ordinance be held on August 22nd, 2023 at 6 p.m. as allowed by city council procedures and rules of order.
That was correct. Thank you. And may I have a second? Councilmember Marshall-Shin.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Councilmember Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, reviewing the study session and being presented with this ordinance, you know, I think the thing that really strikes me is, you know, I hope that residents are well aware that, especially after the Marshall Fire, the risk of living outside the traditional wildland urban interface, or the WUI, and how we are now vulnerable as a changing climate to overgrown forests, explosive development across the West, fuel this ever unpredictable fire behavior. You know, every year and many council meetings, we govern to ensure the protection of health, welfare, and safety of our community. And with each of those decisions, there are trade-offs. And with this ordinance tonight, there are, of course, trade-offs, the trade-offs between cost of making homes more fire resistance and the residents' tolerance of risk and the housing prices that are associated with that. You know, as I mentioned earlier, I've seen the fire demonstration for years. I wish I had the money to install a fire sprinkler system in my house. But, you know, it seems that, you know, my house has other priorities for my home improvements. You know, the option to add a fire sprinkler system is available to homeowners. You know, I believe that Broomfield reserves the right to add sprinklers on a case-by-case basis, such as we did up in Baseline. But with the information I've been presented with tonight, I cannot support this ordinance on first reading. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Marshall Olson.
Thank you, Mayor. I absolutely support this ordinance on first reading. I think the costs that are associated with this are minimal. I did a quick math on my computer while I'm sitting here talking based on the numbers of how much it costs to installation, and the amount it adds to someone's mortgage is a very small amount, less than $50, less than $30, honestly, depending on interest rates. And I do think that the benefits to the safety that we have outweigh the cost that would be associated. And I understand that there is a trade-off, and I understand that we want affordable housing, and we do add things when we add this. And I take that into consideration, but like I said, the cost is minimal. And I don't also agree with.
Councilmember Marshall Olson, I think this discussion is actually more suited for the next vote.
Oh, sorry.
This is just the fix.
I was
So
going off
you-
what.
Yeah, I know you,
Yeah.
but I should have, that's why I clarified. So if you want to hold that thought, you'll
Sure.
have another opportunity to speak
Of
to
course.
the
Yep.
actual one that it pertains to.
No problem.
It'll be on the right record. Okay, perfect. So that being said, any other discussion? All right, next is council's, will the clerk, nope, all in favor? Any opposed? Do the clerical fix? That too? Oh, okay, and let's do a roll call. I wasn't prepared.
Anderson.
Yes.
Cohen.
Yes.
Delgadillo. Yes. Henkel. No. Leslie.
Yes.
Lim.
Yes.
Marshall Olson.
Yes.
Schaff.
No.
Ward.
Yes.
All right, thank you. That passes 7-2. Are we missing somebody? Oh, yeah, that's right. He did text me. He's excused. Okay, so that passes 7-2. Thank you. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2221 on first reading. Will the clerk please read proposed ordinance number 2221 by title?
11B, ordinance number 2221, amending section 15-05, the International Residential Code of the Broomfield Municipal Code to require fire sprinklers for single-family detached, paired homes and townhomes with an effective date of January 1st, 2024.
Thank you. Is there a motion, Councilmember Ward?
I move that ordinance number 2221 be adopted on first reading and order published in full, that a public hearing and second reading of the ordinance be held on August 22nd, 2023 at 6 p.m. as allowed by City Council procedures and rules of order.
Thank you. Is there a second, Councilmember Leslie?
I second the motion.
Thank you. Is there any discussion, Councilmember Marshall Olson?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to finish off what I was saying, I do think that the costs associated with this are minimal and the benefits outweigh those costs. I just also wanted to mention that I understand the idea that the market, if the market wanted this, to what it would provide it. I don't necessarily agree with that because there are plenty of instances where the market fails on many different levels. And it is the role of government sometimes to step in and to push on some things. And I think safety is one of those issues where it's one of those things that gets overlooked sometimes. And I do think that it is our job to ensure that the homes that we build in Broomfield are safe. So that's why I support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lamb.
I support this ordinance. Two reasons, I guess, that weren't mentioned. One is just in general, all of the developments that we're approving are dense. So as we face that realization, I think we have to deal with the fact that we have greater safety risks in general. And the other is the safety or the increased safety possibility that is provided to the firefighters. I heard the firefighter describe how the fire accelerates much faster due to current materials than used to be the case. I heard him describe the risk of going into that accelerated fire for the firefighter. And it seems reasonable to me to, given the fact that we have these materials that accelerate the fire, that we would try to mitigate that for the safety of the firefighter. So those are other reasons that I would support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. I was gonna say, I will support this on first reading. I somewhat on the fence on second reading. I'd love to hear more feedback, but as Councilmember Lim just mentioned, the reduction in firefighter harm is highly persuasive and something that we should give strong consideration to. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. And I'm kind of echoing my colleagues here, but there was compelling evidence from North Metro for the safety for both occupants. And as I had not originally thought about, was actually the fire rescuers. And that was really important to consider, that those that are going in to fight these fires on a regular basis, like that is very compelling to me, a reason to do this. And we also, so as much as I don't want to do the exemptions, I think the exemptions were a wise choice for some of the more cost prohibitive ones where there just isn't the space to put that added tank. So I think this is a good balance and I support this on first reading. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council member discussion? I do have to say, this is one of those competing priority issues that conflicts me because the cost of everything just keeps creeping up and up and up. And we want to provide more affordable homes for people who want to live in Broomfield because it's cost prohibitive in so many ways. And I do prioritize health and safety and that of our first responders, but affordable housing is also a social determinant of health. So I weigh them both. And then I remember what happened to us with just a humidistat installed in our home, a whole humidifier. And it had a small leak, just a drip, 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 drip in the ceiling. Must have been going on for months. No one knew till I went downstairs and I saw the ceiling sagging and try to get an emergency plumber. If it wasn't for Manager Hoffman, I wouldn't have had one. But that's the kind of thing that they do leak, things leak. And it was really expensive. It was really inconvenient and it caused a lot of damage. So I don't even use it anymore. I'm scared of it. So I don't know. I'm in the middle of this and hopefully I won't have to vote, but let's get to that vote. And I think if there's no further discussion, we'll move forward to that vote and we might as well start with a roll call. What? Oh, we didn't have the motion in second? And then the discussion. Yeah. It's okay. Oh, trust me. I know how it is.
Cohen,
Yes.
Delgadillo,
Yes.
Henkel,
No.
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Marsh Holston,
Yes.
Schaff,
No.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
That again passes 7-2. Thank you all so much for being here to give us the expert opinions. And we appreciate all that you do to keep us safe. The city and county attorney's report is next. Ms. Gilbert, do you have a report?
I do not have a report.
All right. Thank you for standing in for Ms. Rogers.
No problem, anytime.
The city and county manager's report is next. Ms. Hoffman.
I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. And there is no legislative update or business before the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority or the Arista Local Improvement District Board of Directors this evening. The second quarter expense reports for elected officials was provided on this evening's agenda under special reports. If anyone would like to comment on this item, now would be the time.
Roxy Julia Lockmore. This one's looking better than the last one or the time before or the end of last year. So keep it up and keep it in mind on what you agree to. Unless you're going to change everything, which I know you guys can do that. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions from city council? Any questions? I just want to state that that the rule that allows council members to borrow funds from other council members that aren't using the travel training, community relations rights has been in place since before I was even on council in 2017. So it's not a new rule. It's always been there and that's what's being utilized. So just to clarify that for the record. There being no further business, we'll move on. There are no requests for future action this evening, concluding the items on the agenda. Is there any other business to come before the council? There being no further business,